Jiva Goswami wrote a total of at least 25 different works in 4 different categories. Okay, four categories. Well, theoretically we can divide them in categories. He didn't make categories. But 4 different types of literature that he wrote. The categories are as follows. First is commentaries on other works. Perhaps his most original commentary is the Durgama Sangamani, which is his commentary on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. In fact, this passage, this story that I told you about him leaving Vrindavan Vallabha, in his commentary, he provides the alternate reading that Rupa Goswami suggested for that one line, Bhakti Spriha Pasachi, as an acknowledgement to his spiritual master's desire to change that because of Vallabha. So you actually find the variation present there in the commentary. But also he wrote a commentary on Bhagavatam called Krama Sandarbha, and others as well. So commentaries is the first category. The second is philosophical works, and the most famous example of this is the Shat Sandarbhas. The third category is literary works. So by literary I mean like Leela type works, which are like Gopala Champu. Okay, he wrote several such wonderful, and Madhava Mahotsava and other such works. So these are focused on Leela, of course with lots of philosophical content, but the structure is different than the Sandarbhas. And then the fourth category are manuals. These are manuals where they're manuals for doing certain things, like Krishna Janma Tithi Vidhi, how to celebrate Janmashtami, or Harinamamrita Vyakaran is the most famous one, which is Jiva Goswami's Sanskrit grammar, where he uses Krishna's holy names in order to teach the rules of Panini's Sanskrit grammar. So Panini basically, he teaches grammar by creating little words that are basically don't have any meaning in and of themselves to refer to grammatical forms or structures. So the past tense will be called this and the present tense this. And so they're kind of meaningless phrases, lat, lit, lung. So when you read Panini's sutras, then you have these strings of basically meaningless words that he has created for this purpose, lat, ling, lung, like that. And Jiva Goswami says, instead of saying such words, why don't we change each one of these words for Krishna's names? And we use one name of Krishna to refer to a specific form of grammar. And so that results in the wonderful experience of many of these sutras, in fact, most of them having double meanings, where it has a grammatical sense and it has a spiritual sense too. Just like one example, he says, samsarasya haras chiti, which means that at the end of a word, when you have the suffix chi, then that suffix disappears within this particular situation. Okay, but what it also means is samsarasya haras chiti. When there is chit or spiritual knowledge arising in the heart, samsara haras, then samsara is finished. It's taken away. And other beautiful examples of Krishna's names and everything being combined. The short vowels I, U, R are called. Can you guess? Which form of Krishna is short? Vamana, right? And then the longer versions of those same vowels, A, I, U, R, are called Trivikrama. Because when Vamana is little, dwarf, right? Trivikrama is when he became very tall and took those 3 steps. So same person, same identity, but longer. And then the vowels are called Sarveshwara, or the rulers of everything, because vowels hold the key to pronunciation in any syllable. And the consonant is dependent upon a vowel. So if I ask you to say the letter A, you could say it, right? Or A or A. But if I ask you to pronounce just the letter K with no vowel sound, you can't. You have to say K, right? So consonants depend on vowels. So the vowels are called Sarveshwara and the consonants are called Vishnu Jana, or the devotees of Lord Vishnu, the followers of Vishnu. Okay? Like this, it's beautiful. The whole thing makes theological sense and grammatical sense, of course, as well. Also, I should mention that Jiva Goswami wrote a manual called the Samanya Champu Lakshana, where it provides a guide a literary guide for writing literature in the genre of Champu and the style of Champu writing. Now, he wrote Gopala Champu. Champu is basically a combination of prose and poetry, where you mix the two together. Just like Bhagavad Gita is all poetry. And if you read the Sandarbhas, what Jiva Goswami writes there is 90% prose. But when you got to have a literary work where prose and poetry are combined, verse and regular writing, that's called Champu. Now, Champu literature did exist prior to Jiva Goswami, but in a very, very minimalistic form, as a very sort of just a workhorse sort of style of writing, which was used to produce a lot of texts that didn't have much literary merit to them. Jiva Goswami really raised Champu literature writing to the level of literary writing, where it became a very honorable and much used form of Sanskrit writing after him. And for that purpose, realizing that he did this, he wrote a guide for writers of Champu literature called Samanya Champu Lakshana. So in other words, it kind of gives you an idea at the level of literary accomplishment he was working at, where he wasn't just writing, like on the side, he would write guidebooks for anyone, even those who were not devotees, to write a certain style of literature, just because he basically founded that mode of writing himself. So 4 different categories, 25 different...
Hare Krishna. So everybody is listening, right? Everybody's
Prabhuji,
Yes,
listening, but difficult to understand from.
yeah, don't worry. That's why I paused it. Don't worry about what he said if you didn't understand. Basically, just see this personality, Jiva Goswami. He is such an amazing personality. He is like a, super genius. He wrote so many different types of books and very, very, profoundly, very advanced and high class literature he wrote. But hear very attentively what he is going to say. Okay.
Works in these categories. Now, this is a wide breadth of writing. I had these 4 categories, which in themselves, great scholar, great teacher, were very, very broad. But even in the area of great scholar, you'd be hard-pressed to find a scholar who writes even 2 of the categories in one type of genre of writing, just because it's so difficult to master even one of these categories of writing, the style. Those who write great commentaries tend not to write Leela literature, and those who write Leela literature tend not to write manuals of writing and so on. So he showed incredible breadth in terms of his literary abilities.
So very important point is coming. So hear very attentively, everybody.
That breadth, though, however, does not compromise depth at all. And hopefully that one example I gave you, which you have in front of you still, the concluding statement, demonstrates just how much depth is present there. But just let me give you one more example of this from my own experience, which is that of these 25 different works in 4 categories, one of these is the Shat Sandarbha. Even though it's called 6 Sandarbhas, it counts as 1 in this category. And that one work is what I decided to.
So Prabhuji is saying that there are 25 huge works he wrote. And out of them, he's talking about one work, which is Shat Sandarbha. And in that, there are 6 sections, Shat Sandarbha. So just hear very attentively.
My PhD work on, but not on the Sandarbhas as a whole, because they are far too vast.
And out of those 6 sections in that one work, Shat Sandarbha, he said they are too vast. So he did his PhD in what he's telling now. Hear attentively.
to work on for just one PhD thesis. And so I focused on the Paramatma Sandarbha. Of the 25 books, one book, which has 6 parts, I focused on the third part. And of the third part, that has 105 anuchedas or chapters in it. And I focused on just one chapter out of those. And of that chapter, I only focused on part of that one chapter. And it was enough to get a PhD at Oxford University. Now, just imagine how many PhDs could be produced on Jiva Goswami's works, how much depth there's present if you're going to unpack. When I started studying Jiva Goswami, I had read these statements from Prabhupada saying he is the greatest philosopher in the world, he's the greatest scholar of Srimad Bhagavatam. And frankly, I'll be really honest, I thought, I'm sure he's an amazing scholar, philosopher, and so on. But there's also some pious exaggeration here involved because we're in his sampradaya and so on. That's understandable. But after studying Jiva Goswami, there was no doubt in my mind that the person I was dealing with was all of these things. That there was no question that we're dealing with the greatest of so many things, as hopefully you've seen in this first part of the seminar today. So this is our glorification of Jiva Goswami. We'll stop.
So 25 works. In that, one work is the Shat Sandarbha, which has 6 sections. And out of that 6 sections, one section has 105 chapters. And out of that, a part of one chapter was enough to give PhD in Oxford University. That was the depth of writing of Srila Jiva Goswami. So many PhDs can come from his writing. Interesting?
Yes,
Prabhuji. This much is understood, Rakshita Mataji, right?
Yes, Prabhuji.
This is the...
Actually, initially, Prabhuji was taking so hard names. I mean, I don't know all those, so I was just listening, but I understood that he's at the end glorifying Jiva Goswami.
Yeah. So give me 1 minute. I'll share some more.